My name is Lily. I'm 31, and for as long as I can remember, love in my family came with terms and conditions. I just never met them. When my sister Madison was born, I was 5. From the moment she let out her first cry, everything, every look, every whisper revolved around her. My mother, Carol, transformed overnight. She had Madison's name stitched onto custom pillows, ordered matching dresses from Etsy, and presented me to the world as the model big sister, the living proof of perfect family harmony. My father, Harold, who used to carry me on his shoulders through the park, was now too busy filming Madison's yawns, her toddling footsteps, her every breath as if she were the axis of the universe. By 6, I had learned that silence was the safest way not to be a burden. I still remember drawing a flying blue horse, proudly handing it to my mother while she was feeding Madison. She barely glanced at it. "A blue horse," she muttered. "Why not draw something real?" "Madison paints sunflowers beautifully," I said. Nothing, just folded the paper, shoved it under my bed, and watched as her refrigerator turned into Madison's personal art gallery. Madison had dimples, she laughed like wind chimes, she lit up rooms. I needed glasses by 2nd grade and carried myself with a slight hunch from always reading. My mom used to joke to her friends, "Lily's smart, sure, but she's a little stiff, not as adorable as Madison." They laughed. I laughed too. On the outside. At 10, I won first prize in a statewide short story contest. The auditorium seat meant for my parents sat empty. They were busy taking Madison to her first ballet class. I came home clutching the certificate, hoping. My mother glanced at it and said, "Good, but don't let studying make you any more uptight." My father, he only asked, "Was there a cash prize?" When Madison got a B+ in English, there was cake. That night, I ate leftover rice while they played jazz and toasted to her brilliant future one. I was never invited to imagine for myself. I wasn't jealous. I was invisible. I'd lie in bed some nights, hugging my worn-out teddy bear, wondering if anyone would even notice if I disappeared. By my teens, I was the unpaid maid of the house. After homework, I washed dishes, did laundry, vacuumed. Madison, meanwhile, was exempt. She needed to focus on her singing exam. Anytime I objected, my mother responded on cue. "You're the eldest. You're supposed to sacrifice, but how much sacrifice does it take to be seen?" I can't remember the last time my parents hugged me, but I remember falling asleep at my desk from hunger. The next morning, my mother shook me awake and said coldly, "Lily, stop being dramatic. You've still got chores to do." After that, I stopped hoping. No more expectations. Not for affection, not even for eye contact. I only wanted one thing to leave. On my 18th birthday, I left home with a worn suitcase, a full scholarship to the University of Michigan, and a heart that no longer expected to be loved. No farewell, no good luck. Madison was live streaming her newly renovated bedroom. My mother sent me one text, "Good riddance, don't bring shame to the family." I didn't look back. In Ann Arbor, I saw snow blanket the dorm rooftops for the first time, and somehow, the heater in that shared dorm room gave off more warmth than our family kitchen ever had. I chose biochemistry, a field my mother once called for antisocial nerds, but I adored it. I fell in love with the way microscopic reactions sparked life, how even the tiniest molecule mattered. For the first time, someone called me a genius and meant it. I worked like survival depended on it. Night shifts in the library. Weekends in the lab. My friends joked that I couldn't survive without working. They didn't know it was the only way I had ever survived. In my senior year, I landed an internship at Everbright Biotech in Chicago. 3 months in, they offered me a full-time role, rare for a new graduate. The starting salary was modest $72,000 a year, but I didn't care about the number. What mattered was that I wasn't someone's shadow anymore. I wasn't Madison's sister. I wasn't Carol's cold daughter. I was Lily Carter, Molecular Development Associate. I managed project budgets. I wore a lab coat with my name on it. And most of all, no one asked me to clean the living room after work. I lived simply. No parties, no shopping sprees, no exotic trips. I cooked at home, reused everything I could, and funneled every bonus, every raise into one goal: buy my own home before I turned 30. And I did. Just after my 29th birthday, I signed the contract on a 3-bedroom house in Evanston, just north of Chicago. The listed price was $445,000. I closed at $437,000 after a firm negotiation and a near 50% down payment. 8 years of sacrifice tucked into a number. It wasn't a mansion, but it had what I needed: a backyard with a cherry tree that bloomed like quiet redemption in spring. A narrow balcony where the evening light curled over my book as I sat rocking gently in a chair. I chose myself. The kitchen was white tile and calm. No grime, no rust. The oven gleamed new and clean. Nothing like the scorched dorm room burner I used for years. I painted every wall with my own hands. I drilled every knob, hung every curtain, not out of necessity, but defiance. Each stroke was proof of all the nights I cried in silence and still showed up the next day. It wasn't a house. It was survival made visible. On move-in day, I mailed a card to my old family address, not as a declaration, just courtesy. It had one line: "I'm doing fine. No need to worry. I didn't expect anything back. That was my mistake." 3 months later, a message came from my mother. "Lily, can you call me for a bit? It's serious. It's about Madison. I read it twice." Then again, it felt hollow, like reading a letter from someone long dead. Madison hadn't contacted me once in over a decade. My mother used to tell people I'd moved near the Canadian border, like I had ceased to exist. I didn't respond, but I knew. When they finally came to me, the girl they once considered excess baggage, it couldn't be for anything good. And I was right. The formal invitation to Madison's engagement party arrived a week later. It came with a separate note from my mother. "We need to talk before the event. Don't be that Lily. Be a good sister." I held the envelope for a long time. My breath slowed. Something beneath the surface of that card felt familiar. The smell of manipulation wrapped in gold foil. I didn't know yet that I was walking into a storm. The kind that isn't loud but calculated, that buries you under silk smiles and familial duty, and they were about to play a game. I didn't even know the rules to. The party was staged at a rented mansion in Lake Forest, designed to impress white silk-covered chairs, crystal glasses in militarily precise lines, cinnamon-scented candles filling the air like false memory. Everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a Manhattan fundraiser. I arrived in a plain black dress, clean, modest, deliberate. I carried a small box wrapped in gray ribbon, a silver photo frame engraved with "Wishing you happiness." It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. A quiet offering from someone who owed no one anything. Madison sparkled in the center like a princess from a franchise I never belonged to. Diamond ring, wide grin eyes that hadn't looked for me once in years. Her fiancé Logan stood beside her, tall, composed, carefully groomed like a politician's son. I placed the gift on the table and turned when I felt it. My mother, Carol. She approached with a smile that looked more like a strategy than a greeting. Her eyes scanned me like a corporate audit. "Your father's waiting," she said, lightly tilting her chin toward a side room. "He wants to speak. Alone." My stomach tightened, that old feeling again. The weight in the chest, the silence before being dismissed. I nodded. The room was quiet. My father stood by the window, arms folded, staring out like a man preparing a pitch. He didn't speak at first, just silence and rustling trees. Then came the opener. "You've settled now, haven't you?" Still not looking at me. "I'm doing well," I replied flatly. He nodded, turning to face me finally. No warmth, no smile. Just the precision of purpose. "Madison's getting married. She needs a solid start." He paused. "And you live alone. You're not even using that house." I froze. There it was. My mind scrambled not from confusion, but from the confirmation of what I had already feared. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I knew, right on cue. Like she'd been listening at the door, my mother stepped in, wearing that performance smile, like it was part of the dress code. "If you really love Madison," she said, placing her hand on Harold's shoulder, like a business partner, sealing the deal. "This is your chance to show it. A unified front. Corporate cold, scripted." And suddenly, I understood. They weren't here to reconnect. They were here to collect. "You should transfer the house to Madison and Logan," my father said. Like he was suggesting I lend her a scarf, not $500,000 worth of bricks and blood. He didn't flinch, just stared at me like it was common sense. "Call it a wedding gift." From her sister. A dry laugh escaped me, brittle and bitter. A gift. That's what they called it. A gift worth nearly $500,000. "It's your house," my mother chimed in. Her voice was too smooth, rehearsed. "You don't have anyone." As if that made it reasonable. As if my solitude invalidated my right to ownership. "So, because I have no one," I said, my voice icing over, "I don't deserve to keep the one thing I've earned." "Lily," she snapped her tone, climbing. "Don't be selfish. Family means sacrifice." I looked her in the eye. This time, I didn't blink. I sacrificed my entire childhood for Madison. Don't ask me to keep doing it in silence. The air thickened. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's mouth twitched, the fake smile gone replaced by the bare bones of entitlement. She stepped toward me, but I was already turning done with the charade. Back in the reception hall, Madison was basking in applause, wrapped in glitter and praise. But when her eyes met mine, something flickered. Not shock, not guilt, just annoyance. Like I'd broken the script, I didn't linger. I didn't want cake or another hollow toast to a picture-perfect life. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. "Are you seriously going to ruin my special day?" "You should know better. Madison?" I didn't respond, but something in my gut twisted. This wasn't the end. The wedding followed just a month later. I hadn't planned to attend, but I showed up anyway, partly to silence their whispers, partly to remind myself I could still stand in a room with them and not shatter. It was held in a glass conservatory in Highland Park, all gleam and gloss. Tall windows stretched to the ceiling, velvet chairs, tablecloths sewn with initials. String lights blinked like false stars above a performance too polished to touch. Everything was designed to sparkle except the truth. I arrived deliberately quiet. My mother's eyes sliced through me with cold indifference. Madison posed under the archway like royalty. She didn't acknowledge me, not even a nod. I found my seat at the very back near the entrance where the light didn't quite reach, and no one had to pretend I mattered. After the vows, as laughter drifted and champagne clinked, I was sipping water when I felt a shadow beside me. "Your father wants to speak with you," my mother said. Again, I hesitated, then stood. Because some part of me, the part still looking for answers, followed. The corner of the hall was curtained off in white, far from the celebration. When I stepped through, Harold was there beside the towering wedding cake, its metal base engraved with names that didn't belong to me. "Lily," he began. His voice, softer than usual, was the calm before. "You still have a chance," he said. "Don't make today ugly." "If this is about the house," I said evenly, "save your breath. I've already said no." From behind the curtain, my mother's voice sliced through. "You're choosing this," she said sharply. "We asked for something simple, and you act like we're robbing you." I breathed slowly, clutching the edge of my self-control. Something simple. My voice shook with fury. I had buried for years. "That house is mine. I worked a decade for it. I never asked either of you for anything. Not even love enough." My father barked. I turned to leave, but then his hand clamped around my wrist. "You don't get to shame this family," he hissed. I yanked away. "What family?" My voice cracked. "The one that's treated me like a shadow my whole life?" Then something shifted, a flash in his eyes. Something dangerous. Before I could step back, his hand reached for the base of the wedding cake. Cold metal swift movement. And then light exploded behind my eyes. The world spun. Pain seared down the side of my face as I collapsed. Warm blood slicked my temple, snaking down my cheek, staining the polished white floor beneath me. Gasps, screams, feet pounding. A voice cried out, "She's hurt!" But everything blurred. I saw shadows rushing. A woman shrieked. A man in a gray suit sprinted across the hall. Logan, his face pale, alarmed, and in the haze of agony and disbelief, I heard one thing louder than the music, louder than the noise. The truth. They were never here for me. They never had been. A man in a suit. Daniel, one of Logan's former colleagues, was the first to act. His voice was firm, panicked, purposeful. "This is an assault. I'm calling 999." He didn't even hesitate. My mother didn't rush to me. She didn't kneel or scream or check if I was breathing. She stood rigid beside my father, not with concern, but fury. Cold and calculated. "You're only hurting yourself, Lily," she said flatly. "This could have been simple. Simple." Daniel's voice rang out again, louder this time, phone pressed to his ear. "I just witnessed a man strike a woman with a blunt object. She's bleeding. She's not moving." I struggled to remain conscious. My head pulsed in jagged waves, vision swimming, but I could still make out Logan's voice slicing through the chaos. "What the hell did you just do?" His voice cracked with rage. My father took a step back, dazed, as though only now realizing the weight of what had just happened. Sirens followed, loud, relentless. 2 officers entered the venue within minutes. Their eyes swept the room, then locked on Harold and Carol Carter like heat-seeking missiles. "Mr. Carter," one officer said, "you're under arrest for suspected aggravated assault." My mother's shriek tore through the glass atrium. "She's lying. She's making this up. She's just jealous, trying to ruin her sister's life." The second officer barely blinked. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "you have the right to remain silent. You'll have a chance to give your statement in front of 150 guests, people who had sipped champagne with them an hour ago. My parents were handcuffed, and no one spoke. No one stepped in." The silence was devastating. A nurse checked me on sight. The world spun in slow motion. I remember the clinking of glass, the soft buzz of disbelief around me, then the white lights of the ambulance. Logan climbed in beside me, without a word. "I can't believe this," he whispered finally, eyes fixed ahead. "I'm so sorry, Lily. No one should go through something like this, least of all at their sister's wedding." I looked at him for a long moment. "Logan," I said softly, you really need to reconsider what you're marrying into. They're not just family. They're a warning." He said nothing. As the ambulance pulled away, I turned my head to the window. Through the frosted glass, I watched the wedding dissolve, guests scattering like birds from an explosion no one expected. The nightmare wasn't the end. It was the beginning. At North Shore Hospital, I was wheeled in under fluorescent lights. A nurse wrapped my head with white gauze. The doctor stitched the wound gently, explaining the concussion. No permanent damage, just a mark that would throb in the dark for weeks. An officer arrived. He asked for my statement. I gave it calmly. Name, time of incident, blunt, object witnesses, Daniel Logan. 3 other guests who had already agreed to come forward. But while I lay in that hospital bed, barely stitched together, the collapse was still unfolding back at the venue. Margaret and Dean Whitmore. Logan's parents had witnessed it all. Always poised, always polished. They stood silent with drinks in hand as my parents were led away in cuffs. Their faces were pale, masks slipping. "I can't believe this," Margaret muttered, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. "That man actually assaulted his daughter at her sister's wedding." Dean turned to Logan with the weight of a judge. "Logan, is this really the family you want to be tied to? Forever?" Logan didn't answer. He just stood still, lost in the aftermath, while Madison rushed toward them. Her dress sparkled like nothing had happened, but her face betrayed her, ashen exposed. "I had nothing to do with that," she blurted, voice rising. "I didn't touch Lily. I didn't know." "But you knew," Margaret interrupted. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was cold, precise. "And you let it happen." Madison stumbled back. I didn't want to ruin the day," Dean cut in. His tone was quieter than before, but it carried more weight than any scream. "The day where your sister ends up in the hospital and your parents get arrested, that's your idea of a wedding?" The silence that followed was like glass shattering. People turned away. Some began to leave. No one defended her. "No! Please!" Madison cried. Her voice cracked as tears streaked her foundation. "I love Logan. Please don't cancel the weddings." Logan didn't look at her. He turned to his parents and said with a voice stripped of doubt, "Let's go." They left as one. And Madison stood alone. No one rushed to her side. Not even her best friend Becca picked up her purse, gave a quiet nod, and slipped out without a word. Madison's white gown shimmered beneath the chandeliers, but it no longer dazzled. It hung like a curtain of shame, heavy and suffocating. The girl who always had the spotlight now stood center stage, but this time with no applause. She collapsed into a chair, mascara smeared and disbelief stitched across her face. Madison's eyes stayed locked on the door that had just closed behind Logan. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was judgment. Whispers sliced through the air like razors. Her sister was bleeding on the floor. No one did anything. What kind of family is that? The wedding, planned for over a year, orchestrated to perfection, ended with no bouquet toss, no first dance, no cake, only an announcement from the staff, clipped and cold. "Due to an emergency, today's celebration will end early." No music, just silence. And beneath that silence, a reckoning. 3 days later, I was still confined to bed rest, per doctor's orders. The throbbing in my head came and went in waves, but the deeper ache, the one in my chest, never left. Logan came by holding a bouquet of purple dahlias, my favorite. He sat beside me gently. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said. What happened that day? It wasn't just someone losing control. It was the truth, breaking through the mask. I didn't speak. The bandages on my head were clean now, but the truth had cut deeper than any gash. My parents made it clear, he continued. The wedding is off. I can't move forward with Madison. I won't tie myself to a family where cruelty is routine. There was sincerity in his eyes, but I knew better. Madison and my mother weren't the kind to accept loss. Not quietly. Not ever. On the fourth day, I was discharged from the hospital. The CT scan confirmed a mild concussion. 8 stitches, no brain damage, but healing wasn't linear. Every bandage change reopened what had been buried for years, their indifference. Not once did I hear from them, not a text, not even a missed call. Not from Carol, not from Harold, not even from Madison. Only Logan came. Every day, juice in hand, soft meals, conversation that didn't feel forced. He never asked how I was feeling. He already knew. That morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm against the tiled floor. Logan sat quietly in the corner, holding a navy blue folder. When he saw me stir, he snapped it shut and straightened to Lily. He said cautiously. I reached out to a friend. He's a lawyer. His name is Marcus Whitmore. He specializes in family law. Cases like this? I didn't respond. He didn't push. He waited. After a long breath, I stared at the ceiling. They're my parents, I know, he said softly. But they're also the ones who put you in a hospital in front of a crowd while trying to steal the one thing you worked your whole life to own. I turned toward him. If I take this to court, there's no going back. Some roads, he replied, should never be revisited. His hand brushed mine. They're not your family, Lily. They're your attackers. That afternoon, Marcus came to the hospital. He was sharp, 40s, well-spoken, with the kind of precision that didn't waste time. He listened, then looked me square in the eye. We're filing on 3 counts, he said. Aggravated assault, prolonged emotional abuse, and attempted unlawful coercion of property. He slid the authorization form across the table. With the evidence and the number of witnesses, this case is solid. My hand hovered over the page. The pen felt heavier than it should have. But then I remembered the cake stand arcing like a weapon. The metallic taste of blood in my mouth, the hollow silence from Madison, my mother's voice. Don't be selfish, I signed. My signature didn't tremble. Marcus moved quickly. Witness statements, medical records, security footage. Within 4 days, the case was ready. A submission to Lake County District Court. I sat in my kitchen the night the hearing date was confirmed, the thick legal folder open in front of me. My fingers traced one line. Lily Carter versus Harold Carter and Carol Carter. Charges: assault, emotional abuse, attempted coercion of property. I folded the paper across the table. Logan placed his hand gently on my back. I'll be in the front row, he said. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My silence was no longer a wound. It was a beginning. A few days later, Marcus called. They've responded, he said calmly. Your parents have officially retained counsel. As expected, the fight had begun, and this time, I wasn't the one bleeding. They denied everything. Their attorney filed a motion to dismiss, claiming lack of direct evidence and accusing me of personal retaliation. They painted me as an unstable daughter with a grudge turning trauma into theater. But Marcus just leaned back in his chair, a slow smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Even better, he said. Let's show them what direct really looks like, and we did. 6 separate videos, 6 different angles. My father's hand gripping the metal cake stand, the swing, the impact. My body crumpling to the floor. Clear audio, screams, blood. My mother's voice shrill and unmistakable, ungrateful. And behind it all, the truth, brutal, undeniable, stitched into the scar across my forehead. 8 stitches, 30 years of silence. I knew it wouldn't be easy. They'd twist the story, play the part of aging parents abandoned by a cold daughter. But this time, I wasn't a child waiting to be believed. I had the law beside me, witnesses behind me, and most importantly, I had myself. I walked into the courtroom wearing a slate gray suit, hair pinned neatly, court summons in hand. My heart pounded not from fear, but purpose. For the first time, I was going to speak my truth, not in whispers or behind closed doors, but with the full weight of the law, listening. A jury watching society, finally seeing. The gallery was packed. Local media had shown up. Some of them had covered the wedding collapse. Logan sat beside me, silent but steady, his hand wrapped around mine like a vow. Marcus stood ready, black suit pressed, files thick with evidence. Across the aisle, my parents sat rigid, their posture sharp, their expressions sharper, but something had changed. The certainty they once wielded, the subtle control, the quiet manipulations had drained. They weren't in command here, they were defendants, and I wasn't theirs anymore. The jury, 9 members in all, mostly middle-aged, sat stone-faced as the footage played. They watched my father raise the stand. They saw my body fall. They heard the sickening crack. My mother's voice, loud and piercing, echoed like a curse through the chamber. Marcus stood and spoke. Calm, surgical. Your Honor, he said, this wasn't an accident. This was the endpoint of a lifelong system of psychological and physical abuse. A family where silence was demanded and love was conditional. One child was exalted, the other was erased. He laid out the case in precise lines. Hospital records, 8 stitches, concussion diagnosis, 6 angles of video, 7 witnesses. Logan, Daniel, an elderly couple who had known our family since I was a child. Then it was my turn. I stood, my pulse steady, my voice even. I told them everything about a childhood spent begging for acknowledgement, about scraping leftover dinner from plates while Madison was cheered on, about learning not to cry because no one ever came. And then I told them about the wedding, about the moment the cake stand turned into a weapon, and how that blow wasn't the first. It was just the first people saw. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because there were no tears left, their attorney argued. My father had lost control in an emotional moment, but the footage didn't show grief. It showed rage, not the kind that erupts. It was practiced, polished, the kind that silences. The trial lasted 3 days. When the jury returned, their faces were calm, eyes clear. The judge asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor, in the matter of Lily Carter versus Harold Carter and Carol Carter, on the counts of aggravated assault, prolonged emotional abuse, and attempted unlawful coercion of property. How do you find the defendants?" "Guilty on all counts." The courtroom froze. My breath caught, then released. Logan squeezed my hand. His eyes were wet, but his grip was unwavering. Judge Judith Morrison, silver hair, solemn face, wasted no time. Given the severity of the evidence and the sustained pattern of abuse, she declared Harold and Carol Carter are hereby sentenced to 8 years of incarceration in the state of Illinois. No eligibility for parole for 6. A gasp rippled through the room, but she wasn't done. In addition, she said the defendants are to pay full restitution for medical costs, legal fees, and emotional damages. $320,000 to the plaintiff. Ms. Lily Carter. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I simply watched as the 2 people who had defined my life by their absence of love were finally held accountable. They stood as the bailiff approached. Cuffs clicked shut around their wrists. My mother turned back once. There was no regret in her eyes, only blame, but it didn't reach me. Not anymore. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to return, no apology to accept, no final word to wait for. As the heavy courtroom doors shut behind us, a soft rain was falling, light cleansing. Logan opened his umbrella, shielding us both as we stepped out into the gray Chicago afternoon. And just like that, I closed a chapter 1 that had stained decades of my life. It would never be forgotten, but I no longer had to carry it. I was no longer the girl in the corner of the room, no longer the silence between family laughter. I was Lily Carter, the woman who stood up, bled, survived, and told the truth with the whole world watching. And this was only the beginning. As we stepped onto the courthouse steps, the rain began to lift. The clouds broke open gently, and sunlight slipped through soft beams, catching the stone underfoot. I paused there, holding the verdict in my hand, exhaling everything I hadn't let go of until that moment. Logan stood beside me, hand still wrapped around mine. Not with urgency, not to protect, just to say I'm still here. "Lily," he said, voice quieter than ever. "I know this isn't a perfect moment, but life has never been perfect. Only our love is." I turned to him, my heartbeat still echoing with courtroom silence and courtroom triumph. Then, without a word, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. No cameras, no crowd, no spectacle. Just me. Just him. Just a moment carved out of history. He knelt on the courthouse steps, the same place I had reclaimed my voice. "Lily." "Carter," he said softly, smiling. "Will you spend the rest of your life with me? A life without pain, without pretending, just peace and real love." The tears came before the answer. Warm, silent tears that carried years of grief out of my body. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes." The ring wasn't loud. It didn't sparkle like Madison's. But it was beautiful, simple silver, elegant. It didn't need to shine. It fit. Not just my hand, but every hope I had, once buried. There was no castle wedding, no cliffside shoot, no guest list with strangers I couldn't name. We married quietly at the end of May in the backyard of the house I had defended with blood. The daisies we planted bloomed along the stone path. Wooden chairs painted white by hand, circled beneath warm sunlight. Our officiant wasn't a judge or pastor. It was Marcus, my lawyer, my shield, my friend. We invited only 30 people, only the ones who had stayed when things got loud, dark and brutal. Daniel came hand in hand with his wife. Logan's parents smiled from the second row. A few colleagues from Everbright stood near the back, eyes glowing with something deeper than formality. Respect. Logan read his vows in a low, shaking voice. "I won't promise to make you laugh every day," he said. "But I promise you'll never cry alone." I couldn't speak, so I placed my hand over his chest. It was enough. He understood. Afterward, we ate homemade cake beneath string lights and old acoustic songs from my Bluetooth speaker. No one live-streamed, no one cared about the brand of my dress. They only cared that I was smiling and that it was real. That night, Logan carried me over the threshold. I laughed, telling him I didn't need to be lifted, but he did it anyway, and I let him, because I had never felt that warm stepping into any home before. Months passed. Quiet, healing months. We painted the bedroom soft beige, planted lavender along the fence, built a wide wooden shelf in the living room, what Logan called the memory wall. I filled it with the books that had walked beside me since Michigan. Proof I had lived. Proof I had made it through. Sometimes I still dream of the trial. Sometimes I hear my mother's voice in the dark. But then I wake to sunlight on the sheets, Logan humming in the kitchen, and coffee brewing in a space I call mine. I am no longer someone's afterthought, no longer a silent placeholder in someone else's story. I am Lily Carter. I stepped out. I stayed standing. And I wrote my own ending one early fall afternoon. I sat in our little garden, the one we planted together. Every flower, a testimony. Every petal, a quiet rebellion. The wind rustled the maple leaves golden and calm. It brushed my face like a whisper. You're safe now. You're free. And that was everything. I opened the old leather notebook, its spine cracked from years of holding back tears. On the first page, written in my 16-year-old handwriting, small, sharp aching, were the words, "One day, I will get out of all this." I no longer have to whisper that hope. I lived it. I used to be the girl standing behind the living room door, clutching an A-plus test no one asked about while listening to my parents praise Madison's every move. I used to skip meals so my sister could eat more while my mother smiled and said, "You're the big sister. You should know how to sacrifice." I once believed love had to be earned through silence, obedience, and invisibility. But I learned endurance doesn't earn love. It only delays freedom. The lawsuit wasn't just about courtrooms and evidence. It was an act of rebellion against years of learned powerlessness. It was me stepping out of the role they scripted and rewriting the ending. I didn't do it to hurt them. I did it to stop hurting. I used to crave their approval. I'd lie awake wondering what more I could do to finally matter. But not anymore. Now I am loved, not for how much I give up, but for who I truly am. Logan sees me. My friends respect me. My colleagues don't ask who my sister is. They only ask what I think, what I can create. Most of all, I have me, whole intact, unapologetic. I've learned to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Forgiveness is no gift to them, it's the key. I turned in my own locked door. After the trial, letters began arriving. From women I'd never met, from strangers who saw their own reflection in my story. Some had endured forced marriages for the sake of family status. Others were dismissed, discarded or silenced for not fitting the mold. They wrote, "Your story gave me the courage to say no." I read each one. Every word cracked something open in me. Not pain, but light. If my truth could spark someone else's escape, then every scar I carry has purpose. That same year, Marcus and I, along with a team of community lawyers, founded Restore, a nonprofit providing legal and emotional support for survivors of familial abuse. Logan took on the finances. I sat with the women, I heard their stories, I saw their tears. And in every session, I recognized a piece of the girl I used to be. One afternoon, a woman in her 50s took my hand in hers. Her voice trembled. "I've lived in fear for decades, but your story helped me leave." I held her silently because I had been her, afraid, doubting, numb from survival. But I had spoken, and in doing so, I'd lit the path for others. I didn't just survive the darkness. I built a way out with my own hands, Lily. Carter used to be a name whispered with pity. Now it's said with strength. It took me 30 years to become myself. But every year after is mine. And I will live it loud, with love, with purpose, with pride. If you're reading this, and the silence feels endless, if your reflection looks like someone waiting to be chosen, you don't need permission to protect yourself. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not weak for wanting out. You, like me, deserve to begin again. This isn't just a story of surviving pain. It's proof of what happens when you choose yourself finally fully. Because our past doesn't define us. Our present choice does. And today, I choose me. What do you think of Lily's journey? Have you faced something similar? Share your story below. And don't forget to follow this channel for more stories that speak to the soul about family, about healing, about becoming.